Good evening, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining, and welcome to the CAYP Psychology Theatre. It's a bit of a different interface, this one, a bit different to webinars and a bit different to what you've seen on Zoom. And the main difference is you're all sat in an audience section watching us essentially on a stage, but you can interact with each other in your row. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see like a microphone icon. If you keep your finger on that icon, you'll be whispering, and you'll be whispering to the other people in your row, so you can actually talk to other people you're sat next to. And just above that icon you can see some emojis, and that means you can interact with this presentation as you go along. So if you see something you like, give us a thumbs up. If something that's giving you an idea, you've got a light bulb. If you don't like something, there's a tomato, but let's not use those tonight. You've got lots of different features that are there. So welcome.
So welcome, everyone. Thanks, Dan, for that introduction into Rome. So welcome to our webinar this evening on sleep, screens and stressed out kids. We have had such an overwhelming response to this webinar tonight with almost 1,000 sign-ups. So thank you so much for joining us and for submitting all of your questions, which we've made sure to incorporate into the whole webinar tonight. So this evening, we're going to be talking about why sleep is such a challenge for children, the link between sleep, mood and anxiety, the connection between screens and technology and neurodivergence and individual differences, but also practical strategies and next steps. So like I said, you submitted so many of your questions, and what we've done is we've put them into the content tonight, but we've also included them with this. When this little graphic comes up, we're going to be including your questions here, which we're going to be responding to. So we really hope that you leave tonight feeling like you've got a better insight into sleep difficulties and how you can support your child. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Daniel Weisberg, who is going to be leading the webinar this evening.
Thanks so much, Ruby. Yep. Hi, everyone. So I'm Dr. Daniel Weisberg. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist. I specialise in working with children and young people going through quite a wide range of difficulties, really. But what my experience has done has led me to develop something called CAYP Psychology. That's our company. And within CAYP, we offer psychological services and psychological healthcare for children and young people. And that's who CAYP are. And we offer this online across anywhere in the UK, but also across 40 clinics all over the country. So thank you all for joining tonight. You get to see us online, and if there's anything more we can do, we've got our contact details later on at the end of the presentation. So let's move on. Let's see what we've got tonight, because sleep and screens and stressed out children is the most commonly asked for service that we see as clinical psychologists. Sleep affects everything, and that is why we've chosen this as our first topic. Sleep has an impact on absolutely every single area of every single child's life, and we know that there can be huge sleep differences across many families, and having an opportunity to talk about this to improve sleep, I think, will hopefully benefit many people. But the question that we often get asked is, why do so many children struggle with sleep, even when we try routines, even when we try good habits? And the most important thing I want to convey tonight is I'm not going to do what many sleep practitioners do and many behavioral therapists do and turn around and say, you need a sleep routine, you need to do. I mean, you're all doing it anyway. You're all trying this. You're all putting these things into place. And for some reason, it's not working. And that's when it leads to these questions of, well, what's going wrong here? What do we need to do different? What support can we put into place? So I'm not going to sit here and say we need to get a sleep routine. It's important, but it's how do we make improvements to things, trying to understand each individual family's circumstances. Because for one family, sleep is going to be a very different set of circumstances to another family, and generic ideas won't necessarily work for everybody. But we know that there are lots of themes, and it's the themes that we'll touch on initially. And the first main theme is the importance of sleep. Why do we sleep? And it is the brain's opportunity to reset. Restoration and repair is the most important thing that we can expect from sleep. You've had such a mega day. Children have had such a mega day, and actually having the opportunity to restore calm down, repair everything, is exactly what happens when we go to sleep at night. But not only is it like for recovery, it's also an opportunity to consolidate all of that information that has happened during the day. So if you imagine like on a bookcase, you're taking out a load of books, and that's what happens through the day. Sleep at night puts them back neat and tidy and organized and ready to learn for the next day. So if we disrupt sleep, we're not getting that restoration and repair. We're disrupting memory. We're disrupting learning, which has a huge impact. And you can see here that if you don't have enough sleep, one of the impacts is that there's an emotional change. Children can feel more anxious. More anxiety leads to bigger outbursts of emotions. Bigger emotions leads to attention and concentration difficulties, which in turn makes children more anxious, and then the sleep problems come back in. So this is the cycle, and we'll come back to the cycle a little later. But I wonder if there is also another element that we don't often think about, and that element is sleep. It is brain chemistry. Essentially, the chemicals in children's brains that are exceptionally important to regulate emotions, to regulate well-being, to regulate how they're managing during the day. So, for example, if we think about a chemical called cortisol, cortisol is our stress hormone. The more we get stressed, the more cortisol we produce. And if you produce more cortisol, you're also feeling more worked up, you're feeling overwhelmed, and feeling overwhelmed gives you that second wind. And that's a phrase that we call tired but wired. Essentially, children are exhausted but then present as completely wired and completely overwhelmed. And you think, how on earth is that happening? We'll keep coming back to tired but wired. There's also a chemical called serotonin. Now, serotonin is really important for regulating mood, to feel good, to have patience and calmness. And sleep is essential to replenish your serotonin. So if you cut sleep short, your serotonin's level dip, irritability goes up, frustration tolerance goes down. You then have a tendency to feel really overwhelmed by even minor setbacks. And a final chemical, throwing chemicals your way, is one called adenosine. Now, adenosine is a chemical that builds up naturally in your brain throughout the day. It creates something called a sleep pressure. So that makes us feel sleepy, and that then should naturally happen at nighttime. The pressure on your brain to go to sleep occurs, and then you sleep, and adenosine fades away. But if you don't sleep enough, adenosine remains in your system, and you then see those tiredness signs, grogginess, slowed thinking, difficulty processing new information, which then can impact a child's ability to learn. So these are all the chemical, magical things that are happening at nighttime as well. So in short, sleep helps us to reset. And so the question that's appeared, why does my child seem tired during the day but can't fall asleep at night? A lot of it is going to be the chemicals, absolutely the chemicals that are there. Tired but wired. They are overstimulated and wired for the next day.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. We're going to move on to the next slide, but also throughout we're going to be giving some practical strategies as to how to help overcome the sleep difficulties too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the why is sleep such a struggle? And this carries on the conversation from before. There is no set answer for this. So it's not like I can say sleep is a problem because of X. The way I view sleep is that sleep difficulties are always a symptom of something else. So if something's going on and it will then be having an impact on sleep, our job is to understand what that something else is. And it's going to be completely different for every single child. But the general themes that are here are behavioral, firstly. So these are things that we call sleep associations, often negative sleep associations, where we found that our children struggle to go to bed at night, struggle to fall asleep. So we put something into place to help, which is a really nice idea. Hand holding, stroking the hair, neck massages, all those things that sound really lovely. But you've now done it a few nights in a row and then a week in a row, and you've suddenly found that is your way that children feel they need to fall asleep. It's an association of how to fall asleep. There are psychological reasons, anxiety has been the main one. Worries have a huge impact on sleep. And what happens when children worry? They want to talk about it at night, and you're exhausted and you just want them to go to bed. And that's the time when all of those worries appear. Fear of missing out. The FOMO is a massive one. We get it as adults all the time, but let's just imagine it's the summer. You know, your young one's trying to go to bed at 8 o'clock or whatever it is at night. Next door are having a barbecue and singing songs all night. It's really difficult to be going to sleep, and you want to be involved with stuff. But potentially more importantly, there is an avoidance here, and going to bed at night is often seen, or not going to bed at night, sorry, is often seen as an avoidance strategy for the next day. If you are struggling with school, then going to bed at night is the time before you have to wake up for school. So if we can delay that, then school feels just that little bit further away. So we might feel that we are, well, not going to bed might be an avoidance strategy as well. We know that there are sleep hygiene challenges as well. Screens, we'll talk about screens shortly, and the importance of the role of screens here. But even food and drink late at night, the environment, the room environment, what that looks like. We know that children and families have a range of health concerns and health differences. Allergies, particularly in the summer, pollen can be a real nightmare, but even potentially more seriously, like sleep apnea, struggling with breathing through the night, it can interrupt sleep and can have a substantial impact on sleep occurring naturally. And then even just natural development and age. Teenagers, the dreaded T word, the teenager's body is a very different beast to that of a younger child. And a lot of that affects, it's something called their circadian rhythm, the internal body clock, which we know in teenagers is shifted later. So teenagers sometimes don't even feel tired till 10, 11 o'clock when we're trying to get everyone down to sleep. So these are just common themes of why sleep can be a problem. And it might be just one of these is something that needs tweaking. It might be a combination of all of it. It might even be something completely different. And this is why different families have different circumstances, but there are lots of reasons why sleep can be a struggle.
So thank you so much. We have a question here, which is, why does my child struggle to go to sleep even when they've been in bed for over an hour? And we had that come up a lot in our questions, didn't we?
I mean, it comes up time and time again, because surely you'd then think, well, my child's been in bed, they're nice and calm, everything's okay. Why are they not sleeping? And I'm saying that in a really nice, calm way. In the real world, going to bed. But actually, we know that this is a very common occurrence. And it's a mixture of all the things that we've said before. So overtiredness and stress. Tired, but wired. This can go on for many hours, but the primary cause of being in bed for long periods of time and not going to sleep is actually overtiredness. Children are exhausted. They've missed their natural sleep window. Their body flags it as a problem or as a crisis, and then releases those chemicals to deal with a crisis, like cortisol, adrenaline. But if you're pumped full of stress, then you get your second wind, and then they're just wide awake. Then children start talking about being wide awake, and you start talking about the importance of going to bed. And in the history of going to bed, has talking about going to sleep ever actually made you go to sleep? So you end up in these cycles of it not working. We'll work on that shortly. So yes, it's a common effect: overstimulation, overtiredness. And myths. Everyone loves a good myth. Myths around sleep are in abundance, and these are actually some of the more common ones. Overtired children just fall asleep. We've discovered it. No, they don't. Second wind is tired but wired. That's exactly what's going on. Overtired children don't fall asleep, and that's part of a big challenge. We often see that situation where particularly teenagers struggle with their sleep during the week, and then they think, right, all weekend and I'll just sleep. I will stay asleep. And you see children, young people, I should say, going to bed and not getting up until 1, 2 in the afternoon. And you think, surely that is enough sleep to have then recovered everything. Catch-up sleep does not work. The idea is great, but it doesn't work. So it's one of the biggest myths in sleep that longer sleeps can reverse the negative effects of sleep deprivation during the week. So it might feel good, it might help you feel less tired in the short term, but but it doesn't work. And it's because you can't erase a sleep debt. It's a bit like a financial debt. You know, if you make a larger payment on something, you think, great, but the interest has already been accumulated. And in a way, that's exactly what's happening with sleep here. So, brain functions that are important: attention and concentration, reaction times, your ability to think clearly and logically and sensibly, does not recover after long periods of catch up sleep. Um, and also, it doesn't I'll come back to, oh yeah, the social jet lag that's there. This is a really interesting term. I was only recently introduced to this idea of a social jet lag. It's this idea where your internal body clock, that's that circadian rhythm that we talked about, doesn't match with your professional or school life or your social life. So, for example, your body might actually want to go to sleep from, say, 11 p.m. till 7 a.m., but school means you have to get up at 6 and go to bed at 9. So there's a complete mismatch. That's what's called this social jet lag. And chronic social jet lag, a chronic mismatch between them, is actually linked to very serious health conditions, particularly as you get older: increased risk of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So I don't want this to be like a whole scary side of things, but we know that there are effects of sleep becoming too disrupted. Here's a good myth: teenagers are lazy. Probably not a myth. Didn't say that. When it comes to bedtime and relaxing and calming, teenagers seem to get it completely wrong. But actually, when it comes to sleep, this is not often a teenager's purposeful behavioral choice. This is their bodies are acting in a bit of a different way. You know, there are all sorts of hormonal changes, particularly melatonin. And as you get older, as you get into teenagehood, melatonin releases later in an evening, so you feel tired more later. So they're stimulated and they want to do stuff, not going to bed. They're not doing the things that we think they should be doing. So it looks a bit like laziness to us, but they're just reacting to their biological rhythms. And then a final myth, and often this is what clashes with potentially different generations. A child's been naughty, and I don't particularly like using that word, but a child's behaviour has not been up to the standards that we expect. Go to your room. And how many times have we said it? Get upstairs, get to your room, do not want to see you. We've all said it, we've all done it, but sending children to their room as a one-off or every now and again, fine. Nothing bad is going to happen as a result of that. But if we use the bedroom for discipline regularly, and that's the place that we go to, remember we talked about that behavioural side, the sleep associations, we then start pairing for a child punishment in a child's bedroom, and that's the place where they're meant to sleep. And that can cause all sorts of associations that might not necessarily be helpful for sleep. We've all done it. I think I did it the other night.
So I just want to add in, if anyone's got any thoughts or comments throughout the webinar, please use the chat function and share if anything resonates with you. That would be really great. So on to the vicious cycle of anxiety now that you were referencing earlier.
What's on? What a great term, the vicious cycle. But it is vicious because you find yourself in this cycle and not breaking out of it. So anxiety, once that starts and we start going down a certain route, we find ourselves in a very clear anxiety cycle, which means you start with one thing, it leads to another, which leads to another, and it takes you right back to the beginning. And what we often see in anxiety is that you get anxious, and we've seen it affects your sleep. It affects your sleep because of the emotions, the chemicals that are going on, the stress, the worry. We'll talk about that shortly. But that will affect sleep, and sleep will become disrupted. If sleep is disrupted, you can potentially become sleep deprived, and you're not getting the sleep. An impact on all the different functions: emotional regulation, social functioning, ability to attend to what you need to attend to, your work, and getting on with things in the best possible way. You make more mistakes. And remember, all of this is because of many of those chemicals that we talked about. But if you're making all of these mistakes, you're getting it all wrong, you're finding yourself in trouble, what's going to happen to your anxiety? It's going to go up, and you're now back into this cycle. So more anxiety can have more impact on sleep.
So a
One,
question here.
sorry, Ruby, please.
Sorry, Daniel. Do you want to add anything else about
I'll go back to
yeah.
those next steps in a second. What was the question?
So we have a question here. How do we tackle sleep anxiety when they lie awake worrying about not being able to sleep?
This happens so much, doesn't it, Ruby? It comes
Mm.
in all the time. And we said it before, when children are sleeping, when children are, and young people are trying to sleep, that creep of anxiety comes into it. And the bit that I was going to mention before is what you can just see behind that hand that's holding up, which is what's going on inside a child's brain whilst they are sleeping or whilst they're worrying about something. If you struggle to sleep, there's an area of your brain called the amygdala, which is like your threat detector. This is the area of your brain that recognizes stress and worry. And that then becomes overactive. If that becomes overactive, you're then thinking about things, you're talking about things, you're becoming more stressed and worked up about things. What does that then do? Ruby, can you go back a couple of
Of course,
get rid of
yes.
that hand that's hiding up?
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, that's it. So we know that the amygdala is the bit that's that threat detector, that real emotional response to thing. And when we are getting worked up by something, we become really stressed out because of that threat and that worry. At the same time, an area of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that is involved for thinking and reasoning and working things out, that logical thinking, that planning and sensible responses, is also impacted. So now you've got a situation where your brain sees a huge amount of stress and your ability to think about that stress is then impaired. And you are suddenly overwhelmed by both of these things, which means the anxieties that were there that might be from our parenting side a pretty minor, meaningless irrelevance. Oh, my friend did this at school, or someone said something mean. But we are now seeing a huge reaction to it, almost a completely disproportionate reaction. And that, I think, is because of the complete combination of what's going on here. We're trapped in this cycle of worry. Our brain thinks it's more stressful than it is. Our ability to reason about that stress is impaired. So no matter what you say, no matter what you try, whatever you're trying to think about helping for your child, you're just being met with like you're banging your head against a brick wall, aren't you? You're saying things that you think should be resolving things, but you're not being met with that same response from your child. And what happens to your stress levels at this point? And parents at nighttime have had a full day doing parenting and life and the real world. And so suddenly you're in this position of a stressed and overwhelmed kid, an increasingly stressed and overwhelmed parent, and then we end up saying things or doing things or shouting that we know is not going to help. But you end up in this situation where that's what happens, all making a child's anxiety go up even more. So we find ourselves in this cycle. So how do we tackle sleep anxiety when we at nighttime? Don't do those things I just said. There you go, solved. No, I recognize that is much easier said than done. It's about how we change the whole narrative at nighttime. That's the shift here. Talking and dealing with worries at night will never, ever work. And we often find ourselves falling into patterns of spending time with our children, wanting to talk with them, and they're finally lying in bed but now want to talk with you. That is not the time to be dealing with this, because that will not help. The one way you can tell if it's not going to help is the moment questions start with a very simple phrase. What if? If you hear that phrase, or a phrase that starts to sound a bit like a what if, get out of there, jump ship, because what ifs will always be focusing on a hypothetical situation, something that could happen but has not happened. And the moment you open yourself to a world of could happens, there's an infinite number of possibilities. So no matter what you say, your child is going to find another route of this. And you say, well, this child's not going to do that. Well, how do you know? What if they do? And you're just taking yourself on a route of infinite possibilities. It's not a conversation to be having at night time.
So we're going to talk a bit more later about practical strategies of how we can support that anxiety. So we have another question about emotional meltdowns and endless worry. So what can we do before bed to help prevent or manage these meltdowns?
I wonder if it's useful to look at the next slide for this, because I think
Yes.
that is a really helpful way of trying to deal with these emotions at nighttime. Now, if we tomorrow say, right, we need to deal with bedtime completely differently, it's not going to work. It's going to be too much of a shift. There's going to be too much of a change. We need to do this very slowly and very gradually. And I think a lot of that comes from changing the entire narrative of bedtime away from we must go to sleep. It's important to sleep. All the stuff that I've been saying is important. If that's the reason for going to bed, it's not going to work. If you don't go to bed tonight, it'll be really difficult tomorrow. We start putting in threats. That's not an approach we want to take. We want to remove the battlefield of bedtime and remove it just onto a nighttime ritual of calm and peace and cuddles. And this is the real world, I'm very aware. But that's the narrative that we want to shift towards. And so I think we need to think really carefully about that last hour or the last couple of hours before bedtime. What's happening in that period of time? And if we are thinking about ideas like having a shower or a bath, calming music, and in fact, actually, let's think about a bath or a shower. I think this is one of the most helpful things we can do at nighttime to help calm things down, because when you go into a hot bath or a hot shower, your body temperature naturally goes up with the temperature of that shower. When you come out of that shower, your body temperature will naturally, gradually come down bit by bit by bit in a process known as homeostasis. Yes, you're on it tonight. So homeostasis is that way that your body regulates itself and comes back to that natural level again. But doing that is naturally calming and tiring. So we're setting ourselves up perfectly for a calm evening. Then we've got things like audio books that we can listen to. Reading is absolutely fine. Something without a screen. We'll come back to screens shortly. There's a lot to think about there. Stretching, yoga poses, calm, twinkly, dim lights. These are things that not for everyone, but can often be really helpful because they're all really nice, calming activities. Contrast that to the talking about worries, that stimulation, that thinking about all of these possible scary things that could possibly be happening. Those worries are the thing that are going to do the opposite of what the bath and the calmness has just achieved. And for some people, these things will not work. Like someone said to me recently, calm down, Dan, listen to some whales singing in the sea. And I'm like, honestly, I couldn't think of anything worse than listening to the sound of whales singing to each other. But some things won't work for you, but some things will. So what I think is a really helpful idea, it's something called worry time. So again, not going to work for everyone, but it's a really nice thing to try. If you are thinking that bedtime is the time when your child wants to talk about all the things that they're worried about, let's make a time specifically for that that's not bedtime. 4 in the afternoon, just after school, 5 o'clock after gymnastics or after a football practice or something like that. A time where you can talk about the things that are bothering you and you are allowed to talk about whatever it is that is bothering you and affecting you. And it's a 15-minute block or so, and you will sit and listen and engage with that worry. But when that time period is over, worry time's over. And if the worry happens afterwards, then you can say, we've had our worry time tonight. We're not going to talk about this now. We can talk about it tomorrow. Write it down and we'll talk about it in worry time tomorrow. And so you're moving that worry away from bedtime. That's the idea. Another option that has recently become a bit more popular actually is something called a sleep pass. A bit like toilet passes at school. You can just show it and you can pop down to the loo or something. A sleep pass is a chance to say, right, I just want one more thing, which might be an extra hug, might be another kiss, it might be coming downstairs for a glass of water, but you're allowed one fine, you can have it, it's yours. That card then gets put away, and there's no more until tomorrow, and then and then you've moved on. So you're just the whole point of all of this is to make that nighttime ritual calm and relaxing. And as I said before, this is the real world. I'm aware that it's not going to be dead simple, but that's the idea that we want to get towards.
So we've had some really interesting questions in the chat, and I'm looking at them, and hopefully we can answer most of them throughout naturally. But someone's asked about reassuring the child without opening a can of worms. So that's scheduling that 50-minute worry times before bedtime. That before you start that wind down is definitely a suggestion. But someone else asks, Daniel, my child asks what we are doing tomorrow. Should I tell them? And I wondered what you could say about that one.
Yeah, that's a really nice question, actually. Um, one of the things that we're not really going to focus on much today is this idea of control. And many children don't have much control over anything in their life. Think about it. They're told what to wear, where to go, who to talk to, everything is controlled for them. But not being in control is actually quite a natural, unpleasant place to be. You don't really know what's going on. Now, I don't think children should have full control of everything. They're children. We are adults, and our job is to help them to develop the skills to then become adults. And that means we are in control and you make the decisions. That's important. But allowing children some form of control can help them feel naturally involved. But if you can control their control, that's even better. So if you say to a young child, for example, do you want a bath tonight? I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be no, and a face. You are not going to get the outcome that you probably are looking for. But if you say, do you want a bath with bubbles or a bath without bubbles? You're in control. They're having a bath, but they think they're in control because they've got the choice over a bath. And I'm using that obviously as a very simple example, but you can extend that up all the way to much older teenagers. Right, if you want to get on the game tonight, do you want half an hour on Roblox? Do you want half an hour on Fortnite? To be fair, that should be something for an older teenager. It's more like for 11, 12-year-olds at the moment. But actually, something like that where you're allowing them that choice, but you are more in control of it. And so when it comes to children asking, what are we going to be doing tomorrow? Fine, tell them and allow it. But as long as that conversation doesn't then merge into, well, what if this doesn't work? And what if that happens? I had a conversation with someone recently about, do you remember when it was the coronavirus lockdown? A Facebook group was set up. I think it was called Family Lockdown Ideas. It was sort of set up, and within half an hour, there were like 1 million people on it thinking, oh my gosh, we're at home. And within the first day of that group, there were these incredible pictures of people putting structure in their life of absolutely everything. And I was looking at this thinking, bear in mind I've got my own children, and so I was looking at this going, 7 o'clock wake up, 7:05 brush your teeth, 7:10 have breakfast, and I'm like, oh my goodness me, that is too rigid. And so if you structure a child's life and tell them absolutely everything that's going to happen per minute, something's going to go wrong and something's not going to happen. And if we have a naturally worrying child, or a child who's a natural worrier, I should say, that is, once you deviate from your structure, you're going to cause yourself more difficulty. So a general message of what we're going to be doing, not a problem at all. Of course, these are your children, you know what's right for them.
And just a quick question regarding the sleep pass, how to manage it if they use that, with an hour later or 2 hours later? How can you have control over how they use the sleep pass?
Set the rules up yourself. Create it. It's not like the set rules of the game, and then you argue about how it works. If you agree it as a family and you say, right, we've got our own family's sleep pass, you've each got one, and then you create your rules together, but allow your children to contribute to those rules. You're developing this yourself. I think that's a brilliant opportunity to be able to set something up with a structure that we've all agreed with, so that we can then implement something together.
So just another question here. What's the best way to calm down a child who gets silly, overstimulated, or emotional before bed?
Yeah. And it's a really challenging set of circumstances, because if you are in that stage of tired but wired, we're up here, our emotions are really high, our stress systems are really active, there is nothing that you are going to be able to say or going to be able to do to calm that down. In the history of the phrase calm down, has that ever helped anybody calm down ever? But we all say it. I say it. It just comes out. I just can't. It's not going to work. So there's actually, if you're in that stage, there's not actually much that you can do. We've almost got to allow that emotion to come down naturally. And if that happens, that might take longer. The aim is to stop us getting to that stage in the first place. And that then comes with this whole bedtime ritual of just gradually calming everything down, shifting the narrative from that battle to calmness, which might take a lot of time.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to screens. And just to note, we're getting quite a few questions in the chat. We're going to come on to neurodivergence and sensory difficulties later, as well as helping break down this co-sleeping as well, because those are the themes that are coming up at the moment in the chat.
And
on to, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And screens, Ruby, how many times do screens come up in our conversation? Screens are a part of every family's life, and work in a way that is completely different to how we view screens, and we're just one generation difference to our children. Imagine our own parents and then that generation who are looking at us thinking it's completely insane. But screens are a way that many children interact with the world. Now, let's just think of what we know about what screens do to sleep. Every single screen that we use, bar those that are an e-ink type thing, like a Kindle, for example, anything with a backlight, so laptops, iPads, TVs, phones, anything that you can see in the dark produces something called blue light. Blue light is not good for our brains at night. Because blue light suppresses your brain's ability to produce a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin is that chemical that helps us to feel naturally tired and sleepy and drowsy, and in combination with all those other ones that we talked about, adenosine, etc. But if you are on a phone at night, your brain is not as good at producing melatonin. So there is an immediate link there between screens and not feeling sleepy. Excuse me, but this isn't just about blue light, because there is also the issue of content. What are we looking at night time? Now remember, especially on phones, because that's the most common thing people are using at night, children and adults, what content are they looking at? Gaming, Fortnite, Roblox, those sorts of games, scrolling through videos, YouTube videos, anything that just sort of appears, social media feeds, social media interactions. Now, every single one of those elements, the social media, scrolling, gaming, is designed by the people who make this stuff to keep you on that stuff. The more you're on it, the more essentially you're paying. It might be free, but that you're viewing the adverts, and those services are making more money by you being on it. The reason for notifications on all of these apps was set up so that when you're not on it, you then go back onto it. Because how many times have you picked up your phone for a notification on, I don't know, something, and within minutes you found yourself lost in a scroll of something else? That impact, we got 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, excellent. I suspect there's going to be a lot more thumbs up from it. But that is a common reaction for us as adults. Imagine the impact for that on children. Now, we often see this as from a psychological point of view, in the same way that addiction works. When you are not on something on these screens, your body wants to be on the screens because of that addictive nature of the feedback from it, the stimulation from it, the social interaction, and that's the fear of missing out and not being involved, the anxiety of not doing it. So the content of this, of what we see on screens, is just as impactful as the blue light effect as well. So there's a chemical and a psychological impact. Check out this bottom bullet point. Bedrooms should be screen free. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, Dagger. What are we going to do? Like, I completely accept that that is not how things work, but that is, in theory, the best possible thing that can happen. Get screens out of the bedroom for particularly those reasons. So let's think of what's realistic here. This is the realistic theory of what should happen. I don't know if those two things are counterintuitive, but the best possible thing we can do at nighttime to manage the impact of what we know screens can have on sleep, get rid of screens, every screen, so it's not just phones, anything that produces that blue light, at least an hour before we go to sleep. At least. The ideal should be 2 hours. Now, most of us are lying in bed at night scrolling. Of course we are. Like, is that helpful? No, but we still do it, don't we? So, and if we're doing that, what are our children doing as well? But I don't think that is helpful in the slightest, because that effect impacts sleep quality. Now, we've all heard the messages of the number of hours we need to get. Children need to get 8 hours, 10 hours, and the number of hours is important, but it pales into insignificance compared to the quality of those hours. Good quality sleep is the strongest predictor of good mental health, of good functioning, in every sort of metric, academically, socially, behaviourally, quality sleep. And if you get rid of screens within that period of time before bed, the sleep quality hugely improves, which will then have huge impacts on functioning the next day. Well, what about charging phones at night? What do we do? Most children say, or young people say, we just plug it in. Well, if you can, get the phones out of the room and charge them outside the bedroom, in the hallway outside, on the kitchen table, in your bedroom, whatever it may be. So the phone is out of the room. What about alarms? Well, you're right, and this is what makes it really difficult. But there is also the possibility of getting like those speakers, Google speakers, Alexas, or even an alarm clock. I don't know if they make those anymore. Probably on the shelf with CD players. But alarm clocks are something to get rid of that screen for phones and that temptation to get onto it. Sorry, Ruby, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say in the chat, we've got a few questions coming up about regulation that we've spoken a lot about recently. So using screens before bed to regulate, that they use a tablet to calm their anxiety, and also that they have a TV in the bedroom that helps them calm down and stay in the bedroom. So if you'd also be able to shed some light on that as well, that'd be really helpful.
Hold that thought. You're jumping ahead. So the ideal here is to be removing screens and replacing them with something that is calming. The bath time that we talked about, that temperature calming down. Think about it. You come out of a nice calming bath. The first thing you do, phone. It just completely undoes the benefits of having that bath. But Lego, reading, drawing, a jigsaw, a Sudoku, anything with a screen. Amazing. Okay, that's the theory of what would be great. So if we move to the next page, we know that that is not always helpful, particularly for neurodivergent children. Not always. It's going to be certainly for many children, but we see it mostly for neurodivergent children. And that's the overall umbrella term that we use when we know that children's brains are wired differently. And neurodivergence covers many different differences. Autism and ADHD are many of the common ones, but there is also dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. Any of those differences is what we call a neurodivergence. And in that situation, screens are sometimes used in a completely different way, a regulating way, which we'll come to in a second, because we know that children with autism approach sleep differently. And that's that difference that we were talking about. For example, there are sensory differences. The sensitivity to noise, the noise outside the window, the noise of the covers moving, the creaking floorboards. There's light, it's too bright, it's too dark. Textures, pajamas feel itchy, labels are horrific. Anything that can have an impact on the senses is often heightened in autistic children. Sometimes that feeling of overwhelm is managed by something called deep pressure. Big, strong hugs can sometimes be exceptionally powerful, but you can also you can get that similar feeling with something called a weighted blanket. It's essentially a blanket with, I don't even know what's inside it actually, but it's something that if you pick it up, it's super heavy. That puts that pressure on your body, and if you, autistic or not, try a weighted blanket, it is one of the most comforting feelings that you can imagine. It's like just the nicest hug you can imagine. But similarly, autistic children often don't see tiredness cues. We know they don't see social cues, that social nuance. You know, when someone's yawning and looking at their watch, that's a particularly hard cue for an autistic person to recognize. But similarly with tiredness cues, they don't recognize it in their own body that they might feel tired. Again, not every autistic child, but just looking at that shows you that an autistic brain sees sleep differently. Similarly, in ADHD, we know that release of melatonin, that calming chemical, is delayed, which means you're going to feel sleepy later. ADHD brains are rapid, going at a very quick pace from one thing to the next to the next. Again, not everybody, but many. And that can be really hard to wind down. You're calming on one thing, you're jumping to another thing, go to another thing. And if children are very easily excited, very easily overwhelmed with things, we're going to be waking up early in the morning. And you often see this in children with ADHD who might go to bed and you think finally they're asleep and they're up a few hours later, bolt awake, ready to go. And you're thinking, oh my goodness me, how on earth is that possible? Busy, busy brains. And the after school overstimulation, I just gave a little weird giggle just then. Sorry about that. But I'm smiling because this is something that comes up all the time. Neurodivergent or not, school is hard. School is difficult. There are all sorts of rules, all sorts of regulations, all sorts of boundaries, all sorts of ways of doing stuff. And that's just the school. Then you've got the social side of things. Then you've got the academic side of things. And it's all in an environment which is out of your control. Remember the control thing we talked about before. The teachers tell you what to do. That, for anybody, is a difficult set of circumstances. Now, for most children, you get on with it. But for many children, that can actually be very difficult and overwhelming. And for children who know what right and wrong is, which for many children, they know what good behavior is. They know what's acceptable. They know what appropriate behavior is and what is not appropriate. Your children have been brought up well. So children, most of the time, follow the rules at school. But I see that a bit like shaking a bottle of fizzy drink, if you will. Like you're shaking it when school's difficult. You've had a tough lesson, we shake it. You've had a bit of a difficult social interaction, we shake it. The corridors are really noisy and busy, we shake it. The toilets are a bit stinky, we shake it. And suddenly you are picking your child up from school or they get home on the bus and that is a very shaken bottle with a very tightly screwed lid. And that can only last until they're back home. Sometimes not even back home. They're in your car after school. Sometimes even in the playground after picking them up. And that lid is off. That's the explosion. That is, we see that time and time and time again. Children holding it together and it all coming out at home. So you tell this to a teacher, my child was X, Y, and Z at home. And the teacher's looking at you thinking, what are you talking about? If I only had a class full of rubies, I would be delighted. And you're sat there thinking they don't understand my child. So that after school stimulation, what I've just explained is part of that. But we also see children get home and they're free and they're back in control and they're back on top of things again. And that can lead to that difficulty with winding down. Now, that explosion that we talked about is exhausting. And you might find children are exhausted afterwards and they then want to go to sleep. Naps after school, naps in the afternoon are not helpful for anybody, I don't think, because all it does is shift your sleep later on in the day. Remember what we talked about with that catch-up sleep. Naps won't do that. That can often have more of an impact. So if we can try to reduce napping, that's better. Really.
Um, Thank you so much. So there's a lot going on in the chat, and one of the things that came up earlier is that bath and shower time and the whole bedtime routine can be very difficult from a sensory perspective. Do you have any recommendations to manage the difficulties of the sensory environment during that time of getting ready for bed?
Yeah, and even showers. We talked about here about the nice hot temperature, and for most children, that can be absolutely delightful. It's calming, it's warm, it's lovely. For some children, the thought of that is exceptionally distressing. So, which is why I said at the beginning, this there is no one size fits all here for this. This is what can happen for. This is general themes that we're talking about. So, if a shower is going to cause you problems, we can sit here and talk about how nice it is to cool things down. It's not right for you and your family. Let's not do that. But are there ways that we can help to include that calmness that is not distressing, that's not a sensory overload, and that's down to your family's circumstances?
I'm just wanting to say someone can hear someone else speaking apart from us, so maybe just move rows. It might be somebody else in your row. So just wanted to say that. Also, just one other thing, can you comment on white noise if possible? Apparently, some people think it causes some anxiety, other people find it beneficial. Do you have any comments on white noise?
Again, it's different for everybody, isn't it? Now, I remember for my children, the moment they heard the noise of a Hoover, um, instant silence. No matter what feeling, all three of them, no matter what they were experiencing, the sound of it was there. And we started with an actual Hoover in a child's room, and I'm like, this is not acceptable. So we found an app that then played the Hoover noise, and similarly the static noise. Sometimes it can be really helpful. For other children, those sounds are really distressing and they need complete silence. So it is going to be different. And then I heard someone the other day called something called brown noise. There's different types of noises here that can be helpful. If it works for you, go for it. Absolutely go for it. If you find that it's helpful, use it. If you find that it's not, don't. But sometimes having that noise in the background is really helpful. But if you're going to play it in a child's room or a young person's room, try to do it through a speaker, not through a screen.
Yes, if you could just comment on the link between dyslexia and sleep difficulties, and then also if we've only got about 8 minutes left, so we want to whiz through the next few slides because we've got some great content on there as well.
Sure. So interestingly, dyslexia is a neurodivergence, and we often think about dyslexia just being reading problems and writing problems, comprehension difficulties. But actually, we know that reading and sleep regulation involve very similar neural pathways. The differences that we see in dyslexia are often similar difficulties in sleep difficulties, and they affect that circadian rhythm, that sleep-wake cycle. So it can actually be harder for a dyslexic child and a dyslexic adult actually to fall asleep at that traditional time of going to bed and then waking up feeling refreshed. We also know that there are different sleep stages, and one of the, as you are asleep, one of the sleep stages is called deep sleep. You might have heard it called REM sleep. This is where your brain is at the very deepest of your sleep. That's the dreaming and the real depth of sleep. That particular time of sleep is really important for memory consolidation. You've experienced things in the day, and then your brain is tidying it up at night. Remember at the beginning, that tidying up your bookshelf, essentially. It's essentially your brain sorting out the day's learning. Now, for children who have dyslexia, difficulties with working memory, which is that ability to hold things in your mind, it is impaired. And that impairment can make consolidation more difficult. So it's harder to retain what you've learned during the day. The same process is happening at sleep. So the point being is children with dyslexia can often have similar sleep difficulties as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Going on to co-sleeping, which has come up a lot in the chat as well, about children waking up in the middle of the night and wanting to go and sleep with their parents, and also just waking up in the middle of the night generally.
Yeah. Co-sleeping's a really interesting one. Every family is going to approach sleep in their own way that is meaningful to them as a family. And if we want to start moving away from co-sleeping, the aim is to be slowly undoing sleep associations. So if you are sleeping with a family member, if you suddenly say, right, you're now 8 years old or whatever it is, you need to be in your own bed, it's not going to work the next day. It has to be a gradual change leading to sleeping independently, and it's a gradual withdrawal where we might move into their bedroom, but you are with them, and then you gradually move away. It's after a certain amount of time they move from your bed into theirs. There's all different approaches here, but it's about a very gradual step by step change over time. Now, one of the really interesting things with changing things when it comes to sleep is it requires a huge amount of effort from your side. And remember here, sleep is happening at the worst possible time of day for you. You've had your full day, you're exhausted. And so if a child's coming into your room at night and you don't want that to happen, the aim here is for you to be saying, right, come on, we go and sleep in our own room, and you pick them up and back into the room, or you guide them back into their room. And that is fine if you've got the mental ability to actually manage that. If it's in the middle of the night and you are absolutely exhausted, it might not be possible. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It is just, if we're going to start a process of changing things, the moment we start, we have to see it through. Otherwise, it's the equivalent of children wanting another chocolate. Oh, please let me have another one. Please let me have another one. I want another one. And if you keep saying no, 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 but the 20th time they say, and you go, fine, do you know what? Have one and then shut up. Fine. If you do that, all that's going to happen is there is a process that child learns. I just need to ask 20 times and I've got it. Success. Now, it's not obviously a conscious thing, but that's what we do with sleep. If I go into mum and dad enough, then they're going to let me stay in their room, for example. So if you're going to start something, gradual step-by-step changes that you are in the right place to say, now we're going to be able to do it. Yes, I think that helps with that.
Yeah.
And then, yes, other sleep challenges. This is the last bit, guys, just before you can go off and see what chaos your children have caused. Night terrors and sleepwalking. I know this is often associated for much younger children. Unfortunately, night terrors are horrible. That's when children scream as if the worst possible thing is happening to them. Vivid, realistic, awful nightmares. There is nothing that you can do to help improve that. There's no techniques or approaches or things you can do to help make night terrors go away. It's a developmental phase that they will grow out of. And all you can do is cuddle and tell them that you love them and it's going to be okay. You know, those sorts of messages to say, we're here to support you and help you, and then help them back off to sleep. It's really, really difficult. And I accept that it's not going to work for everybody. I can see me there, but that's the general pattern that's there. Nightmares, again, you know, children want to talk about it and tell you what happens, and we need to give them that space to be able to say, I get it and I understand. But if you then start talking about what's happened in a nightmare in the middle of the night, it's going to then trigger that more what ifs, and is something going to come back, check under my bed, and all of those things that then make sleep that even more difficult. So bedtime's not the time for difficult conversations, which can be particularly difficult when you've got these sorts of sleep challenges there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to note that a lot of people in the chat are putting in their recommendations that help them. So make sure that you have a look at the chat, because some really useful things in there.
Yeah, thank you so much. The real world is often a lot more helpful than that of a psychologist, but sometimes a psychological support can be something that you might need. So I said at the beginning, these are themes of ideas that generally work for most people. It is not going to resolve everything for everyone all the time. So it might be that you want to look into additional support and get some extra help for this here. So that might be if you see that there are, if you see, battle of emojis, we love it. So if you see that there are particular difficulties going on here, so sleep issues persist, you've tried things, you've given it a shot and it's not working, you see that sleep is impacting friends and schools and relationships and performance, if you see that anxiety and mood is actually worsening, you've tried all the things that many parents want to be able to try, and it's not working, then potentially something else is going on here. And if that something else is going on, maybe you want to seek additional support. And that could be from a GP, it could be from a colleague, it could be from somebody at school, but similarly, it could be from a professional, ourselves, or other healthcare services. Psychologists are well placed to be able to help because we take that step back and look at all the things going on here. And we will never say, get a sleep routine, because you've got one and it's not working. So our job is to understand your individual circumstances. Okay, I think we've come to the end, Ruby, haven't we, in terms of timing?
I think there was just a question about trauma. So I think if we just touch on that point as well at the end, it'd be really helpful for some people.
Oh, of course, yes. So it deserves much more than just a quick 10 seconds or so, but we know that children, particularly children who've experienced very traumatic circumstances at early stages in their life, can have significant difficulties with sleep throughout their whole life. A traumatized brain is one that needs care and support for the long term, all the time, and it needs a very tailored, careful, considered approach. This is why a one-size-fits-all will not work for everybody, because different brains need different approaches. So use us, use services, use colleagues and friends to be able to help out. So the last message to take on from today is sleep difficulties are always a symptom of something else. If something is going on and it's affecting sleep, it's the something that's going on that we want to be able to work on, not necessarily the sleep, although there are things that we can do to support sleep. So Ruby, last bit for you.
Yes, our next webinar is in November. It's going to be on big feelings and big reactions, making sense of your child's behaviour. So follow us at CAYP Psychology on social media and you'll see all of our updates, and also we'll email you the link to that webinar as well if you're interested. So thank you guys so much for joining this evening, and big thank you to Dr. Daniel Weisberg for all of your insights and tips.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, guys. Oh, God, it's the difference. Great.